Lecture 1, Module 1. Just some introductory comments to get us going here. First of all, just in general, anthropology, especially cultural anthropology, which is my specialty, is the art and science of cultural critique. In other words, cultural anthropology seeks to critique culture, break it down analytically, try to discover what makes it tick, so to speak. And as it turns out, culture is largely a response to nature. Well, we're not going to pursue that here because that gets us off into a whole other discussion of anthropology in general. What about then the anthropology of religion? Well, the anthropology of religion is the art and science of critiquing religion. And when I speak of critique here, I'm speaking of constructive criticism. So criticism, in other words, that's substantive, data-based, and empirical. Critique is actually the one method that allows us to get at the essence of religion. In fact, the best way to learn about anything is to subject it to a very harsh, substantive, data-based, empirical critique. And that's what we're going to do here with religion. So as you can see, in regard to anthropology of religion, it really has nothing to do with belief and embracing any one particular religion, but rather it's the critique of the tendency among Homo sapiens to be religious on a global scale. Okay, well, this brings us to important aspects of this critique. Some of the things that we're going to keep an eye on as we critique religion. First, and for those of you who have had my anthropology courses before, you've heard me talk quite a bit about cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is pretty much the intellectual foundation of a lot of what we do in anthropology. Cultural relativism can mean a few things. One way to describe it is like this. It's the mindset that no one particular culture or religion will serve as the standard by which others are judged. So in other words, you go into the study of any religion with a completely open mind. And your task is to learn about that particular religion or critique that particular religion, right? Without assuming there's any one that serves as the standard. So cultural relativism guides all sorts of anthropology, especially the anthropology of religion. Once again, we will not assume the superiority of any one form of religion. Besides, it's impractical to do so, because in order to assume superiority on the part of one, then that means you've come up with some sort of comparison that you can do that will give you some sort of hierarchy of value or worth. And in fact, that simply can't be done when it comes to religions for reasons that will be discussed a little bit further down here. Second important point of the critique of religions is this. Religions are largely accidents of history, geography, and politics. So no religion was, quote-unquote, handed down to us from God or the gods. They are all the unique, particular products of a particular matrix of historical events, geographical setting, socio-political goings-on, etc. And in fact, in any major religion, in any religion, you can go back in time And you can see those points in history where things turned based on some historical event. In Christianity, for example, what would Christianity be today without European colonization? Well, it certainly wouldn't be the largest religion in the world. What about Islam? Where would Islam be were it not birthed in the Arab culture, where people were highly organized, very capable soldiers and administrators, and they just swooped across the land in Asia all the way to Pakistan in the east and all the way across North Africa to Spain in the west. Well, that is the traditional area for Islam, and it's only there because a very powerful army brought Islam to those countries. Same with Christianity. The only reason why there's Christianity in Australia, North America, and South America is that a very dominant, organized, technologically advanced people, the Europeans, brought their religion with them as they subjugated people around the world. Anyway, we could do this with all religions. So religions are accidents of history, geography, and politics, largely. Next point. Virtually everyone's religion, I'm talking about individuals, are tied to the circumstances of their birth. So I'm saying to you that probably about 95% of the time, 95% plus of the time, if you have a person that's religious, and if you know the circumstances of their birth, like for example who their parents are and where they were born, then you can guess their religion, which shows you how important enculturation is in regard to religion. Now, oddly enough and curiously enough, that doesn't prevent that person from growing up thinking that their religion is, quote unquote, all that. Now, I'm speaking primarily about the fundamentalist. So once again, if you know the circumstances of a person's birth, you can almost always guess their religion. And of course, there's a lot of sociological and anthropological sort of facts that derive from that. So why is it generation after generation, 99+% of all individuals born in Egypt are Islamic? Well, I mean, I think you know the answer to the question. It's quite obvious. And what's interesting is that if you could take that very same person and place them in Thailand, and they would probably be a Theravada Buddhist. Or you could take that same individual and have them born in Louisiana, and they would almost certainly be Christian. So that tells us a lot about religions in general. First of all, it helps us understand why there is no consensus in religious matters. In fact, there is practically zero consensus, universal consensus in religious matters, because there are so many of them, and not a single one of them has made their argument so well that the vast majority of people in the world have embraced it. In fact, the largest religion, Christianity, is only the religion of 1 in every 3 people. So 2/3 of the people in the world are not Christian. And to break that down further, even half of Christians don't agree with the other half. I'm talking Protestants versus Catholics. The next point will help us understand one of the reasons why there's no consensus and very little agreement, And it's this: religious claims are non-falsifiable. So the major claims and beliefs of the world's religions are non-falsifiable. It's important that you understand what that means. To be non-falsifiable means that there is no test that we can even conceive of that would allow us to falsify the belief. In other words, you're not making a claim about something in the world that we live in. Right? Because if you were making a claim about something real in this world, we could test it. So these beliefs are not falsifiable. They're non-falsifiable. And the rule of falsifiability tells us that claims that are not falsifiable are meaningless. And we're speaking of meaningless in the philosophical sense, just meaning that you can say them if you want to, you can believe them if you want to, you can disbelieve them if you want to, but it doesn't really matter because there's no data to be brought to bear on the issue. May be true, may not be true. We cannot know. That's what we mean by meaningless. And that is true of the major claims of the world's religions. As you know, for example, Hindus quite readily accept the miraculous claims of Hinduism while rejecting out of hand the miraculous claims of Islam and Christianity. On the other hand, Christians quite readily accept all the miraculous claims of their religion, and they are quite miraculous, while just, again, out of hand, totally dismissing similar claims made by other people. Well, why can you so easily dismiss them? Because they're not falsifiable. That's why. And another reason why there's no consensus of religions around the world. And this leads us to the next point. Religious claims are never tested. Right? So all we have is quote-unquote cheerleading that goes on for the various claims, dogmas, and beliefs of the religions around the world by their adherents. There's no testing. They're never tested. They're never critiqued. I'm talking now about believers. Now, we're going to do that, right? Because we're anthropologists. We're going to critique the heck out of these things. But as far as the believer goes, these claims are never tested. In fact, they're never doubted. They're only accepted as absolute truth, especially by fundamentalists. And that is one of the reasons why religious claims and religions themselves, quote unquote, stand the test of time. Well, why do they stand the test of time? Well, usually, if an idea stands the test of time, that means it's a very strong idea, making valid claims about the world. However, in this case, they stand the test of time simply because they can't be tested, only embraced by the believers and rejected by the disbelievers. Two other points before we stop here. There are, at last count, around 10,500 different religions in the world today. That's an amazing number. Now remember, we're talking distinct religions. So Christianity counts as one. Islam counts as one. Hinduism is one. Even though all of these religions have many different sects and denominations, if you counted those, it would probably get us up around 50,000. But there are 10,500 distinct religions in the world. A lot of things you can glean from that. First of all, the no consensus issue we talked about, right? Clearly, if there are 10,500 different religions in the world, then that shows a striking lack of any sort of consensus on religious matters. And that's important. Now, one last point I want to make here. I do reference fundamentalists from time to time. The fundamentalist of any faith are those who believe the literal word of the written text, for example, as it was written. They are absolutists. They believe that their religion is the only true religion, and that's really not negotiable, and they reject the holy books and the beliefs and practices of all the other religions. That's fundamentalist. So that is the strictest, most myopic, in my mind, form of religion. In Christianity, based on the numbers I've seen, probably something like 25 to 30% of Christians are fundamentalist, which means actually most Christians are not fundamentalists. So the Christian fundamentalist, for example, reads the Bible almost like they were reading yesterday's newspaper. They really do believe all the mythologies of Adam and Eve. Like, Adam and Eve were real people who existed 6,000 years ago, and they were the first people. The earth is 6,000 years old. Claims that are absurd today in the world we live in based on all the science we have. But nevertheless, fundamentalists continue to embrace those ideas. So a lot of the criticism in this course will be directed at fundamentalists and not so much at others who may be somewhat pluralistic. In other words, entertain the idea that maybe some other religions are valid. There are some that are also spiritual in that they've sort of rejected institutionalized religion, more in favor of a personalized sort of religion. So just want to make that point clear, and what I mean by the term fundamentalism, and that much of the critique we're going to be discussing in this class is directed at fundamentalists. Not all, but much of it.